You don't hate people. You hate something far more specific than that. And the moment you understand what it actually is, the whole story you've been telling about yourself starts to shift. Most people never question this. Most people who call themselves antisocial arrived at that label the same way. Too many exhausting rooms, too many conversations that went nowhere, too many times leaving early and feeling more relief than guilt. And somewhere in the middle of all that, a conclusion formed. I just don't like people. This is who I am. But that conclusion, the one that feels like self-knowledge, might actually be self-protection wearing the mask of self-knowledge. And those two things look almost identical from the inside. The difference only becomes visible when you know where to look. So let's look. Start with this. Think about the last conversation you genuinely didn't want to end. Not because the topic was fascinating, not because the person was impressive, but because being with them felt restful. Like the low-grade tension you carry into most social situations, that subtle performance, that quiet self-monitoring just wasn't there. And you walked away with more energy than you arrived with. Hold that memory for a second, because someone who is truly antisocial doesn't usually have that memory. They don't leave a conversation with more energy. They don't feel relief when another person finally becomes honest. They don't come alive when an exchange stops being performative and starts being real, because other people simply are not that central to their inner world. But you have that memory, and that matters, because it means what you have is not an absence of appetite for connection. It is an appetite so precise that most social environments never come close to satisfying it. And in the absence of what you actually want, you've learned to prefer nothing, which looks antisocial from the outside, but is something else entirely from the inside. What drains you isn't people. It's friction, the specific friction of being in a situation where something real feels possible and nobody wants to reach for it, where you can feel the depth of what a conversation could be, and instead it stays shallow, stays easy, stays performative, and you have to smile, nod, and carry the weight of that gap for the entire interaction. That is what costs you, not people. The distance between what is happening and what could be happening. And once you see that clearly, a lot of your past behavior stops looking like avoidance and starts looking like precision. The early exits make sense. Turning down invitations makes sense. Sitting in a room full of people and feeling strangely separate from all of them makes sense too. Not because you don't want connection, because what is being offered in those rooms almost never reaches the part of you that actually needs reaching. Now this is where it gets more complicated and more honest. Solitude is real for you. That's not a defense mechanism. That's just how your nervous system works. The quiet genuinely helps. Being alone feels clean. You think better there. You breathe better there. And none of that needs to be explained away. It's real. It's valid. And it's part of who you are. But there is a difference between solitude as something you freely choose and solitude as a wall you built so you don't have to risk another disappointing connection. And after enough years, those two things can become genuinely hard to tell apart. Here's how you know the difference. The solitude you freely choose is peaceful, but it doesn't make you empty of longing. There are still moments when something in you reaches, not loudly, not dramatically, but it's there. A small urge to send the message, a sudden wish that one specific person were here. A strange heaviness when the quiet stops feeling peaceful and starts feeling a little too complete. That ache matters, because someone who truly doesn't want people doesn't usually feel it. They don't miss being met. They don't feel that private pull toward being understood. But you might. And if you do, then what you've been calling independence is only part of the story. The other part is protection. And protection that made sense at one point can slowly, without you noticing, harden into identity. You stop saying, most interactions drain me, and start saying, I'm just antisocial. That shift sounds small, but it changes everything. Because one is a description of an experience. The other is a verdict on your nature. And once you accept a verdict on your nature, you stop questioning it. There's another sign, and this one tends to stop people. Being misunderstood bothers you more than you let on. If you were truly antisocial, if other people genuinely weren't central to your inner world, their misreading of you would pass through lightly. It wouldn't stay. It wouldn't create friction. But that's not always what happens, is it? Someone reads your silence as coldness, your caution as arrogance, your distance as disinterest. And even if you say nothing, something in you reacts. A small internal correction. A wanting to say, that's not what this is. You're reading me wrong. That matters. Because indifference doesn't usually ache when it's misread. But someone who quietly wants to be known, someone with a very specific hunger for being understood correctly, feels that misreading, even if they've become exceptionally skilled at pretending they don't. And this is where the real pattern becomes visible. A lot of people who call themselves antisocial care far more than they show. They understate it. They hide it. They act less affected than they actually are. Not because the feeling isn't there, because showing it feels risky. Because they've learned through enough disappointments, enough moments of reaching and not being met, that it's safer to seem detached than to admit how much being unseen still costs them. And after a while, that learned detachment starts to feel like personality. You stop saying, I learned to protect myself, and start saying, this is just who I am. But those are not the same thing. And somewhere underneath that certainty, you probably already know it. Because here's the thing about people who are truly antisocial. They don't usually light up under the right conditions. They don't usually transform when someone finally meets them at the level they've been quietly waiting to be met at. They don't suddenly become more present, more open, more alive. But you might. The right person, the right tone, the right quality of honesty. And suddenly, the guarded version of you is just gone. You stop rehearsing. You stop managing how you're coming across. You stop being slightly smaller than you actually are. You just show up, fully, without the usual cost. That is not what no desire looks like. That is what selective desire looks like. That is what a nervous system that knows exactly what it needs looks like, and has gotten very tired of settling for less. And once you see that, the question changes. It stops being, why am I like this with people, and becomes something more worth sitting with. What kind of connection have I actually been hungry for this whole time? And have I been protecting that hunger, or have I been hiding it even from myself? You don't need to force yourself into rooms that never fit. You don't need to become someone who finds small talk sustaining. Your solitude is still yours. It's still restorative. It's still part of who you are. But it no longer has to be mistaken for the whole story, because the deeper truth might be this. You were never someone who didn't want people. You were someone who wanted something more honest than what most people knew how to offer. And when that honesty didn't come, you learned to prefer the quiet, which was reasonable, which was intelligent, which made complete sense given what you had experienced. But preference that started as a response can start to feel like nature. And nature, we stop questioning. So maybe the question to leave yourself with isn't whether you're antisocial or not. Maybe it's whether the carefulness you've built, the distance, the closed doors, the early exits, is still serving you. Or whether it has become a story so comfortable that you've stopped wondering what might be on the other side of it. Because if something real still makes you come alive, even now, even after everything, then the story was never finished. You were never closed by nature, only careful by necessity. And those are not the same thing.